This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, wonderful. You are in a time of transition and you never thought you'd be here. And all of a sudden, you have to start over again and again and again. And we were certainly not taught how to start over as kids. Quite honestly, a lot of times in the old world of you lived in the same town forever, you never moved, you married the boy across the street, and nothing ever changed. They didn't really have to start over quite as often as we do, but we live in a new world. And we have Miss Reena Friedman Watts, who is the host of the amazing podcast, Better Call Daddy, as well as all kinds of other accomplishments that, that she has done. But she is also accomplished at transitioning and having to start over. Reena, how are you?
I'm so excited to be here with the wondrous Sarah K.
That's right, girl. And we barely got to the recording because we were like girl chatting it up so much. So finally we were like, okay, we have to like bring the listeners into this conversation. And Reena, you are about to hit a new transition in your life, right?
I am, yes. My husband, after 10 years of us living in Chicago, decided to quit his job and accept a job in the same day. And he did kind of allude that he might be doing that, but it was still quite a shock when he actually did it. As you know, I'm a mom of 4. I have one entering high school, one entering middle school, one in elementary school, and one entering elementary school. It is going to be quite a transition, one that I don't even think you can probably prepare for. So what I have been doing for the last 4 weeks is holding down the fort and taking on less clients than I normally would, because like we were talking about before, you know, the first week my husband left, my 3-year-old was very sad that his dad had left and didn't know where he was and was crying for him in the middle of the night. And I really needed to step into that mommy role, because in order for my kid who shares the room with the 3-year-old to get sleep and be able to go to school and not want to go to school, I had to be the stabilizing force. And so there are ebbs and flows of being able to be career woman. And right now, that is something that lights me up. And my kids, you know, definitely see that as an example, but they also are seeing mommy stay cool and calm under pressure.
Gretchen Rubin, I think it was, she wrote The Happiness Project. And I think it was her that she had the quote, and she says, you can do it all, you just can't do it all at the same time. And when people ask me like, okay, what does life balance look like to you? Or, you know, how do you manage? And I was like, man, I manage seasons of, like, I may think about like my whole year being balanced. If I try to balance a day or even a couple days, and it's like the more I go on, the more it stretches out. It used to be like I balanced the week, then I balance every 2 weeks, then I balance the month. And it's like, man, some days I'm killing it professionally. Some days I'm killing it in mommy land. But I loved, as you were describing that, the self-awareness you brought to that process.
Well, I'm 4 weeks in now of my husband working out of state in Houston, and, you know, me getting the 3 older ones up at 6 a.m, going back to sleep for 2 hours, and then getting the other one to play group for half a day, then running on the treadmill, having my coffee, answering some emails, and picking up the little one. It's crazy. And what's interesting though, is that the older ones are taking on a little bit more responsibility, which I think is good. You know, they all agreed to get themselves to school, and that is actually a big responsibility. They have to walk 2 blocks. And, you know, I told my oldest son, who is 14, that I need him to look after the other 2. I need, you know, we live in a big city. We live in Chicago. You know, sometimes there's homeless people in the park on the way to the bus stop. I don't feel comfortable with my daughter or my youngest son walking alone. So even if he's not feeling good that morning, I need him to get up and walk them. And they've been really good about getting to school. And so I've been giving them slack on other areas. And what's interesting too, is my husband came home. He flies in every weekend to spend the weekend with us, which is also a big blessing. But, you know, things that he's like uptight about, because when we're all together, you know, we expect more out of them. I've been letting slide. So, there might be more dishes in the sink than normal, or there might be more toys on the floor. And he's like, I can't even walk through this room. I'm like, I know, it's okay. And like,
season. It's a short season, and then you'll hit the reset.
yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I know a lot of our listeners have had to make a transition, whether it be through a divorce or something like that, to be like, you're almost living that single mom life right now,
I was
And
actually thinking about that. I was like, I have a whole new respect for people that have gotten divorced, are single mothering, are military spouses. I mean, my God, you have your own calmness, and then having to reintegrate somebody into what you're doing week after week or month after month, it's disruptive. It's really disruptive.
It's disruptive. And I want to point out in your situations, because you're not going through a divorce, but you're still having to readjust your expectations, both for yourself and for your kids. And I think if you do go through a divorce, you have this idea in your head that like, okay, the only reason I'm having to do this is because I'm divorced. And there can be some like bitterness that like, I'm raising my hand in this, like maybe my listeners are just better people than me, but I was bitter about some things. It's like, well, if you're happily married. So, and this is like literally probably my personality at the time. I was so angry. And I was like, oh, well, you got to stay married, so you can have expectations for your kids, but I have to make this other decision because I was stupid and married the wrong person. So here I am in this situation, and I think we can kind of get in that self-talk. So it's actually was really helpful for me. And I think would be for our listeners to hear that that's part of parenting and part of like living. It's not just like, well, your kids are doomed because you're getting a divorce. Like that's just kind of like your son having to take that responsibility. I do agree that there's some good pieces to that. And I do want to point that out to my listeners, because I know if they're at the stage of life I were in, they're like, well,
I have a story alongside that. So last week, my husband, he helps a lot. I would not have 4 kids if he didn't. And so I'm getting a real good dose of how much he does help. And last week I was taking my 3rd son to martial arts, and, martial arts ended like right up against my Toastmaster class, which is something that I do because I love, and it betters me and it helps me with my public speaking. And just, I love being a part of a group where I get some good feedback. And I'm chasing my 3-year-old around, the dojo and outside and in my car and trying to kill the hour. And I call my husband, and he's literally like at the gym, no distractions, in another state. I'm managing the martial arts. I'm chasing the 3-year-old. I'm going to miss my Toastmasters or have to listen to it on the way home. I was like, I cannot even talk to you right now.
Well, we talked about the self-care. We talked to, in this process of transition and like new problems that pop up that you never thought you were going to have. We talked about like lengthening our rope a little bit, right? So I heard you talk about giving yourself more grace and stretching out like the season. What other tips do you have as far, what are you doing in your own life to lengthen that rope so you don't reach the end of your rope?
I last year was very successful, like you were saying, in one area. I did really well in my business last year, and I definitely put my health aside, which in the pandemic, everybody's been getting healthy, right? I mean, I took extra vitamins and quercetins and supplements and all these things, but I notice that when I earn my coffee, which is workout first, those endorphins get going. I'm in a better mood. And even my kids notice it. Like they'll even say, Mom, why don't you go for a run before we have this conversation? So and last night too, I was like, God, so many people talk about meditation. I was like, my husband left again. I took my 3-year-old to drive him to the airport. I was like, let's put on some calming music. Let's try that. So I literally laid in my bed last night with my 3-year-old. I went onto YouTube. I typed in meditation. The first song wasn't quite a fit. Then the second one was, and I was like, oh my God, there's something to this. And I was just like, making up different breathing, even though I don't even know how to do it. And the 3-year-old immediately started like emulating me, and he started doing it. He fell asleep like within 20 minutes right next to me. And I was like, yeah, it's incorporating healthy things. It's like taking a break and like knowing what puts you in a better state. Is it listening to something positive? Is it doing meditation? Is it going for a run? Is it getting outside and getting, 10, 15 minutes of a recharge, just looking at some trees blowing in the wind?
Well, and I know you listened to Megan Hunter's interview, and she talked about, we cannot bypass. I see so many moms, and we just want so bad to like, okay, I don't want to worry about me. That feels scary, but I want to do right by my kids. Right. And it's like, okay, so how do I teach? I don't really want to learn how to be confident. So how do I teach my kids how to be confident if I don't know how? Or how do I teach my kids to take a break if I don't know how? Or how do I teach my kids to rest or eat healthy or sleep or whatever it is? So I loved what you described, what I call co-regulation. So as you and your son were like co-regulating, he was able to relax because he could feel that you were relaxed.
I've really been learning that over the last 4 weeks.
Mm.
Because like I said, when my husband came back and he's used to our supercharged environment of being 100 miles an hour, I've gotten so much calmer because I've had to let some things go. I've had to take some things off my calendar. I've had to be there for them over the last 4 weeks and finish up strong the school year. And I've been listening to them more. I've been letting things go more. I've been trying to manage my emotions. I mean, yes, I still snap, when I can't walk through a room and I'm stepping on a Lego, or, I do still snap when I haven't slept in 4 days and the baby's been, sticking his feet in my back, but a lot less. I've been snapping a lot less. It's funny because you're a high conflict consultant, and I actually liked that you called narcissism that. Like, there's so many buzzwords, and I was like, oh man, actually listening to your description, I was like, I feel like I'm that. I feel like I've had to learn, and I come from that. We were talking about how it can be genetic. I come from an intense family, highly emotional, type A, tell it like it is. And that's not always healthy. There definitely needs to be a balance there. You can't always do that, or you're going to end up having to make some apologies or explain yourself later.
And again, using words like always, like with our conversation, I hear always, I hear seasons. And it's like, yes, if you were always so focused on work as you were last year, things would fall apart. Now you're in a season that you need to be super self-reflective, which I am so proud of you, especially if you came from like a high conflict, super type A situation. I'm so proud of you for
Oh yeah, this has been a super reflective period. And I'm even thinking like, we checked out 4 schools in 4 days in Texas. Literally, it was such a quick trip. And how can you even make the right decision about a school? I mean, everybody's on their best behavior and showing you their beautiful campus and their beautiful electives and all the good points, but you never really know what a school is like until your child goes there. And is it going to be great for all 4? I mean, I did send my older 3 to the same school. Was it a good fit for one? And maybe it wasn't a perfect fit for the other, right? So what I'm trying to teach my kids through this is like, look, we're going to give it a try and we're going to make some adjustments. And like one of my kids, I did already sign up for summer camp. So we're going to have to fly him back to Chicago. But the others, like I have 3 kids that I'm literally going to go check out a new city with. I'm like, we're going to find new parks. We're going to find new museums. We're going to find new coffee shops. We're going to find record stores that your dad used to go to when he was little. We're going to make new memories, and I'm going to make time for that. And something that we were talking about is, how do you move to a new place and find new opportunities and make new friends? I just was on a podcast where I said, if you go on other people's podcasts, you don't go on there and just talk about your business. You go on there to make a friend. And one of my listeners actually corrected me. And she said, instead of trying to make a friend, be a friend. And I was like, wow, that little reframe is so deep, because if you go somewhere and you try to be a friend, and you try to be of service and you try to see how you can help others, that is where opportunities happen.
Absolutely. And I love you describing making those opportunities. Like you described a lot of, for people who might be afraid of change, a lot of really scary things like getting out there, going to new places. And it is the little building blocks, right? Like what I heard
Yes.
you say is like find a new restaurant in a new park or find a new friend through a podcast. It doesn't have to, because I think when we're facing transition, we think the only things that count are these huge leaps. But it's the little building blocks that make so much the difference. I mean, the huge leap is obviously the move, but the if we're building a pyramid of our lives, right? I hate to say it's so cliche to be like one brick at a time, but it really is.
I mean, I can give you some crazy examples, but like, even in transitioning from, we moved from, I've moved so many times in this marriage, but I met my husband on an internet dating site called JDate. I was living in LA and he was in the PhD program at Berkeley. And we must have gone on like 9 or 10 dates. He proposed after like 4 months. I decided I'd had my name in the credits enough times in LA and I was ready for the next chapter of getting married. I got married after 8 months, moved to a new city, did not know anyone, did not have a job. I mean, it's just so insane. But then we ended up like 3 years later moving to Chicago. He gets a job at a tech company. He starts telling people about my TV past and like what I'm passionate about doing at a company party. They ended up creating a role for me at the subsidiary of the company that he was working for, just in conversation from me schmoozing at a company party. You just never know. I feel like every time you move, it's an up level, to be honest. You're making new connections. You're, hearing new people's experiences, new perspectives. And look, my parents have lived in the same house my entire life. My grandparents have lived in the same house my entire life. I think there's beauty to that as well. But I wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I wanted to experience different things. And I think that there's the beauty in that. And it's funny, when I met my husband on that internet dating site, I said in the profile, I want somebody who keeps me guessing. Boy, did I put that into the universe, because he didn't even really give me a choice on this. He felt like it was time that our chapter in Chicago had closed and then he was ready for the next chapter, and he knew that we would adjust and we would figure it out and he would lead us there, and we're doing it.
It is. It's just that process of figuring it out, because as you said, you never know what's going to happen in these new circumstances. What I can say is you do know what will happen in the old circumstances, and it's like, if you do the same thing over and over again, you're probably going to get the same results. If you do
100%.
there's new results, there's new opportunities, right?
Yeah. I think that during the pandemic, a lot of people have tried new passions. Have you always wanted to take guitar lessons? Have you ever wanted to take a pottery class? Have you ever wanted to learn windsurfing? Have you ever wanted to jump out of a plane? I mean, people are doing these once in a lifetime bucket items, right? And I think, even if you're not great at windsurfing, or even if, ceramics wasn't what you thought it would be, you can try these things and meet a completely different community of people. Right? And they're going to have new stories and they might introduce you to someone new. And so, even commenting on social media that I'm moving to a new place, I cannot tell you how many people in my DMs are like, oh, let me know when you get settled. I know someone there. And you know what? I'm going to make a list of every one of those introductions, and I am going to call each one of those people and maybe grab coffee with them, maybe do a Zoom with them, see where those introductions go. And it's like a choose your own adventure novel. I'm excited about that.
I love the choose your own adventure novel. And I love your energy behind it too, because it's a scary thing, right? I've had in my own life, I've been doing the toxic person proof stuff for so many years. And then my new book is about problem solving and decision making, which my clients see it as I'm doing the same thing. But sometimes out on the outside world, it's like, oh, is she doing something different? And it's terrifying. Right? It's scary. And I was on an interview before this where I was being interviewed. And I said, I just want to say out loud that it's scary. Like I want to say, because sometimes I think it's in this life of choose your own adventure, people leave out that chapter sometimes because it may make them look, I don't know, not perfect or whatever, but it can be adventurous and scary at the same time, and you just kind of do it anyway.
Yeah. I've done a lot of do it anyway, a lot of put one foot in front of the other. One thing that I feel like has really given me that example, I mean, kind of to tie it into my show, but my dad for the last couple of years has been taking care of his parents. I mean, oh my God, like the past 5 years, he took care of his dad until he passed. And now he's taking care of my grandmother and taking care of our elders and keeping up a business and keeping up a marriage and being a father to 3 girls. I mean, my God, if he can do all of that, I can hold down the fort with, 3 kids that are pretty independent and 1 baby. Yeah.
So speaking of your show, I know I'm excited to come on, and we both talked about how much we cared and admired our fathers, and I know you've made a whole thing of it, which I love, Reena. So tell people about where they can find out more about you and your show.
Yeah. So the name of my show is Better Call Daddy. And that is because he is always who I call for advice, both professionally and personally. He's my biggest cheerleader. He's my biggest role model. And I knew he would not back out. And I wanted to share his wisdom with the world. So I made a show around it. You can go to bettercalldaddy.com to hear those stories. What's so crazy is that by creating this show with my dad, it has just taken so many spins and so many different directions that I never would have imagined. I mean, people have come to me with their inspirational father stories, with their absent father stories, with their sperm donor daddy stories, with just all of these topics, even conversations that I never would have imagined having with my dad, even challenging my dad's thinking. And what's so great about it too is that I'm encapsulating that wisdom, which I can then share with my kids later in their life so they can know what my dad thought about different subject matters. And I even got to interview my grandmother before her dementia kicked in. And so I have now, and I found a tape of my dad's father when my dad was clearing out my grandparents' factory. And so I had a tape of my dad's dad converted to an MP3, and I had my dad react to a tape that I had found of his dad.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
That was really special. Yeah. And so I feel like this show has been therapy for me. It's helped me document my journey. And I know from the comments that people need you to tell your story. More than one person needs you to tell your story. People are waiting for you to be brave to tell your story, and it helps them be brave enough to tell theirs.
Preach it to the back of the room. I call that leading by example. And I actually was in a training one time, and they said they were teaching us to tell our stories, or they were telling our successes. We were supposed to like be able to start talking about our successes, because you can't get a promotion or promote your business or whatever if you can't say the good things that are happening. And it was interesting because this person came in after me, and she didn't hear that part. So I had just like done my little brag thing like I was supposed to do. That's what I was supposed to be doing that day. And then she came in, she said, well, I won an award, but I didn't want to talk about it because I felt bad. And I said, I said, when you do that, I was following the rules. Like, we're in a women's executive leadership conference. I was following the rules. I said good things about me. When you come in and feel bad about saying good things about you, you make me feel like I did something wrong. Right? And so when we are like hiding our stories or hiding our successes or hiding, this like in my kid childhood, it was like this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, when we're just hiding our light, right? It's telling other people, women, men, whoever, that they need to hide their light too.
That what that reminds me of. Okay. So when I went from the jump from working for other people to working for myself, I was working for this financial firm, and my job literally was like to reach out to people on LinkedIn all day long. I was supposed to connect with financial advisors, centers of influence, chief financial officers, and invite them to these like fancy steak dinners and then teach them about this life insurance product. I was really good at like marketing these events and getting people to come and putting all the marketing together, but I didn't love the product that we were selling. So I ended up hiring Gary Vee's event producer to help me like jazz it up, change the titles, make the marketing a little more snazzy, give me a spin on what I was already doing. And it was actually a lot different than the events that she was putting on in the entrepreneurial space. And it wasn't necessarily a fit, but her and I like totally hit it off. And then when I ended up leaving that place, she was like, hey, do you want to come work on an entrepreneurial event? I'm putting on a Gary Vee event. I was like, oh yeah, that's totally like something that I feel like I'd be more passionate towards. And she needed help booking sponsors for this Gary Vee event. I knew nothing about booking sponsors, but here's what I did know. She had put on events before where she had gathered 2,000 people. She already had corporate sponsors on board. She had really good speakers who were going to be in attendance. She had, all these like cool things that were going to happen at the event. So what I did was I was like, look, just send me that Excel sheet with all the brands that you want to be there. I'll figure out the messaging, and I'm just going to brag about everything that you've already accomplished. I literally did that. If you talk about K-Swiss is going to be there, Interac is going to be there. We don't have an airline on board. You want to be the only airline on board? Last time she put on an event, 2,000 people showed up, So how I'm tying that into what you were saying is that you have to have bragging rights. You know what I mean? That's how you bring people to the party. If you start with the bragging rights and you make it sound like this is something happening, people want to be a part of that. Right. So that's what you lead with. It's funny because I even had a guy who worked on ManCow, and he's now at a brand that sponsored my show. He was like, I love your open. It's really creative. I love how you've incorporated your kids and your dad and how you've mashed things up.
Happening too. Yeah.
He was like, but if I were you, he's like, I would brag about all the shows that you've been on. And I was like, I might think about that for the next season, because yes, it is bragging, but it's also street cred. It's also social proof, right? It kind of goes along with, you need a lot of recommendations on LinkedIn. You need your recommendations to be current. How many people have you written recommendations for? How many shows have you been on? Have you been on a show this year? Has it been 6 months ago? Right? Like you have to constantly be updating your profile. And that's why I say, like, if you want to start a podcast, try guesting on podcasts in your space. See what other people in your niche, in your genre are talking about, and what can you add to that conversation?
Well, I was almost distracted in, excuse me, I was almost distracted in our conversation. I never am. Let me start there. You kept using the lines, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out.
Yeah,
I'll figure it out. And I maybe that's the theme of this episode, because in transition, what I heard you say, Reena, which I'm so grateful for your wisdom on this, is I'll figure it out. And that's exactly what I tell myself too, because when we tell ourselves, I'll move my feet after I've already figured it out, you will literally never move. You will never have that transition or that life that you want. And so I love your language, and
my whole career has been, I'll figure it out. It's been one example after another. I mean, even from moving from Chicago to LA, I knew no one. I applied to a post-production supervisor through the Producers Guild, which I got into through producing one show. The Jerry Springer Show was my first job out of college. That qualified me to get into the Producers Guild. Still, when you move to LA and you've worked on one show and you're a producer, big whoop. Everybody's a producer. Okay. That street cred doesn't work. I mean, it's cool because I got into the Producers Guild. I could go to these like movie screenings and like hang out with these established people, but it took me an entire year to get back up to that level. I took an executive assistant role to 3 seasoned producers and learned a completely different side of the business. I took half the salary I was making in Chicago, and I learned accounts payable. I learned accounts receivable. I learned how to do location scouting. I learned how to do payroll. I learned how to do the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And then I applied for a post-production supervisor role to this guy who had been in the industry for 20 years. And he was like, he gave me a chance. He was like, if you could figure out Springer and you could produce that show, you could be a post-production supervisor. Do you want to start third shift? Yes, I do. Can you start tonight? Yes, I can.
Mhm.
And I just figured out where I was needed. One thing, it's funny, but like one thing that was my responsibility was turning in the time cards for all the editors, all the transcriptionists, all the assistant editors. No one likes filling out their damn time card. I felt like such a nuisance asking these people every week to do it. So I just started literally filling them out for them. And I would go door to door and be like, hey, do you mind just signing off on these hours? Did I get them right? And I became everyone's friend like that. Like, they're like, oh, thank you. We hate filling that out. Like, it was such a manual process, right? So I was like, if something's different, just edit it. But like, otherwise, just sign on the dotted line, right? And I did that for everyone in the department. I mean, to the point where, yeah. But then I also like started becoming a second pair of eyes to the editors where they're looking at the cut over and over and over again. And I've never seen the cut. And they're like, hey, can you watch this? Are you saying anything? Are you noticing anything continuity wise? I started realizing that I could be an asset there. Then I started, supervising the voiceover takes and working with the voiceover talent and being a second set of eyes there. And my skills just gradually built upon themselves. And now I'm leading shoots.
You jumped out of the plane and then the parachute appeared.
100%.
And anybody who's taken a leap, who's taken a chance, that's what they say. I'm obsessed with patterns and pointing out patterns. So I want to scream. I know it's our conversation, you like talking, it's like I get a flashlight and I'm like, see, let's shine in on that, because that's the patterns of success. Like I'm sure success leaves clues.
It 100% does. And that's why I'm just like, okay, I know a couple podcasters, a couple people that are on the radio in Houston. I've had one even on my show and I've been on their show. Will I end up working with that person? Maybe. I'm excited to like maybe go to her baby shower, but maybe she'll introduce me to somebody who I'll end up working with, or who I'll end up being their friend, or maybe I'll find opportunities on my own. You know what? Maybe I'll apply to some and maybe I'll network to some. I'm just excited that like the sky is the limit. Like it's a completely blank slate right now. And you can paint your own picture.
Reena Friedman Watts, thank you for helping us paint our picture and fill in the fear of that blank slate sometimes. And most importantly, for helping us build amazing lives after toxic relationships. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.